Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon-neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation. Smart homes are almost commonplace today. It's not unusual to find your least technical neighbors connecting their smart thermostat, their video doorbell, water leak detectors, and other devices to a phone or a computer to manage the house when they're away or simply to optimize their spending on electricity and water. Now, the smart yard is poised to join the mix. And our guest today is ePlant CEO Graham Hine. The company recently introduced the TreeTag, which is a solar-powered monitor attached to a tree to monitor its health and send updates wirelessly to a phone. TreeTags are placed on the side of trees using a screw, and with a plunger, they measure minor size variations in the tree. For example, a contraction of the bark might be an indication of stress, such as a lack of water. The TreeTag also includes an accelerometer to detect movement patterns that may suggest instability, as well as a humidity sensor to augment local weather data. Notably, the TreeTag also employs artificial intelligence to process and transmit its data to the cloud. You can talk to your tree using ChatGPT as an interpreter, and the experience is like chatting with a friend, but it might be about how much water the tree needs to be healthy or a report on its growth and the carbon it has captured as it grows. ePlant is one of the most intriguing and fun devices we've seen this year. We wrote an article about it a couple of months ago, and it can provide information about the state of our yards, forests, and orchards to increase our insight into nature. It might even be able to tune us into the consequences of climate change in ways that link our own health to that of the trees around us. You can learn more about ePlant at eplant.com, and let's get into the conversation. Hey, welcome to the show, Graham. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Really good to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know we had a good introduction earlier, and really excited by what we're doing and excited to tell you about it.
Great. Well, when we talked, you were told me about your background in ocean-going robots, and can you first explain how did the idea of a tree health sensor emerge from working on ocean-going robots, and are the problems of monitoring forests and oceans similar?
Well, so, I tell people I've gone from sensors in the ocean to sensors in the forest. The ocean-going robot was, of course, a different type of platform. It was a surfboard-sized vehicle. It used wave and solar energy to propel itself. And so it was essentially an energy harvesting recording system to collect data at sea. And we did a lot of climatological monitoring using that device, and we were able to put a lot of them out there. In the forest, you have a different set of problems for the platform, but essentially you still have the same remote data problem that you have sending data from the ocean. You need to get data from the device up into the cloud and to people. And that's what both systems do. So when Boeing bought Liquid Robotics, which was my prior company, I was CEO under Boeing for a while. And it was a great experience for me, but I realized that I'm the startup guy. I like the beginnings of companies, the entrepreneurial side. And I got into conversations with one of the founders of Liquid Robotics, who was also the founder of ePlant. And Joe Rizzi and I talked, and we said, hey, there's a time for sensors in the forest. We can make these things miniature. We can make them inexpensive. We can make data collection from trees and vines and plants easy. And that's what we set out to do with ePlant.
So before we talk about what it does, tell us how a tree tag is placed on a tree and connects to the customer's phone.
Yeah, so a tree tag is placed on a tree by putting a little screw bolt onto the tree. You then mount the tree tag onto that. You tap it with your phone, just like you do tap to pay. There's a tap to activate to start it. That starts the tree tag recording and sending data. It then transmits it over LoRaWAN, which is a 900 megahertz long distance, low power radio that's perfect for little devices like this. It can go several miles, connects to a gateway, which connects it to the internet, which connects it to the cloud. And from there, of course, once it's in the cloud, we can deliver it to anybody, anywhere.
So the starter pack includes both the radio receiver and the tree tag.
Yeah, so the gateway device is the other end of the LoRaWAN connection. And that's got to be, really you only need one of those per several thousand tags within a large area of a couple of miles. But we want to make sure that those folks who are on the fringe of that network have a means to communicate, so they all have a gateway system.
And the device is solar powered. Does it have a, do you need to maintain a backup battery or anything like that?
It's got a hybrid supercapacitor, which is kind of a cool little device. It's actually a cross between a lithium ion battery and a supercapacitor. So lithium batteries have a problem with charge cycles. So they're, good enough for a car if you're charging it once every few days, but if you're charging continuously with solar, you'll run out of charge cycles with a lithium battery. Supercaps have effectively tons and tons of charge capacity. They can be charged over and over and over again without a problem.
So it doesn't need to be taken apart or anything like that.
Yeah, but the lithium, the supercaps typically leak energy, so they won't store it very cleanly. Lithium batteries will store it without any leakage. The hybrid supercap does both, so it's an incredible device. I mean, when I went to school, a 70 farad cap supercap was the size of a Coke can, and now it's the size of less than a half a AAA battery.
So, what in a nutshell does TreeTag monitor? As I understand it, you sort of set a baseline measurement for the tree and then watch for changes. So, what are you measuring?
So, the primary thing we're looking at is what I call the pulse of the tree and what scientists call dendrometry. So, it's if you think of a tree structure, in the middle of the tree is the hardwood. The hardwood, particularly when it's alive and in the tree, is a very stable reference surface. It doesn't move very much at all. It's actually, from an engineering perspective, a very solid, non-moving substance. So you anchor the screw into the hardwood. The outside layer of the tree, underneath the bark, is an area called a cambium. That's where new cells are added. That's where water cycles up and down. So water flows up through the hardwood and down through the phloem, and you get this daily cycle of water moving underneath the bark and the tree effectively expanding at night and contracting during the day as it breathes. So we call that the pulse. Mm-hmm. And just like a human pulse, it's a very data-rich signal. So we're not quite at the stage of advancement that people are with interpreting human heartbeats, but we're on the path to that.
So in addition to this extremely slow pulse, you also can monitor the tree swaying or leaning. And what does that tell a forestry worker or a homeowner about the tree and what it needs?
Right. So the secondary instrument there, which is the one you're talking about, is the accelerometer. It's just like the accelerometer in your phone, which you can use to level things or see how you're moving or detect if you've fallen over. We're using it similarly for the tree. So if a tree is at risk, and somebody is interested in seeing, or if it's in a risky position, let's say near your house or near your car or near infrastructure, power lines or a road, it can be useful to monitor the tree to make sure that you understand its biomechanics and whether or not it might be prone to fall over. And that's what we're using the accelerometry signal for. Really, simplistically, it's just if the tree is starting to lean over more than a certain amount, that's a predictor of it falling.
When we last spoke, you shared this story about an intense windstorm in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and you expressed the hope that the TreeTag would mobilize people to protect the trees they love.
Right.
But when a windstorm happens, is the accelerometer able to say, this is swaying a lot more than it should, based on what we know about the local weather as well?
Yeah, we have the ability to detect essentially the primary frequencies of the tree and the amplitudes of those sways. So in a windstorm event, and we haven't implemented this feature yet, it's on our roadmap, so I'll be a little forward-looking here. But the idea would be to watch the sway of the tree, see if it's in an event like a windstorm, and start to warn people that, hey, this tree near infrastructure might be at risk. And there's an ability to detect kind of natural sway, which a tree is going to do just as part of its biomechanics. You want a tree to sway. You don't want it to be an unresisting, brittle object. But if the tree starts to shift its root plate, that frequency of that sway is going to change. And there's been some good research done, actually an article published in Wired magazine not too long ago, about interpreting those accelerometer signals to determine whether or not a tree has started to come loose in the soil. And that's when it's really a danger.
So did you design TreeTag primarily for home use, or was it?
No, we've it's really a commercial product. So it started out as a commercial product. We've been selling it into agricultural and forestry research, both urban forestry and wildlands forestry. Our first customer was a chocolate grower. So they're growing cacao trees in a greenhouse. And we had a little Bluetooth version of our device, short range radio that worked great in a greenhouse. They tried it out. They put it on 20 trees in their greenhouse and turned the water off on 4 of them. And within an hour or two, we were able to see that 4 of them had kind of gone off the reservation. And this was very early in the days of us looking at these signals. And we said, hey, something's different with those 4 trees. And the folks on the Zoom call kind of looked at each other. And then the greenhouse manager raised his hand and say, hey, I just turned water off on 4 trees. Are those 4 trees? Sure enough, they were. And we realized we were seeing something really interesting with this signal.
Now, the device is aware of local weather patterns because it's talking to the internet.
Yeah.
What other information do you conceive of as being cross-referenceable with what you know about the tree in order to begin to provide us a lot more insight about not just the tree itself, but the environment around it?
So my brother has this phrase. He's my CTO, and responsible for a lot of the inventions that happen at ePlant. But Roger's statement is the tree tag is not the sensor, the tree is the sensor. And then you ask, what are we sensing? Well, we're sensing what's happening with the climate around the tree and what's happening with the environment around the tree. So, I live up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So living up here, you see the Douglas fir trees, which were a pretty prevalent tree up here, really starting to struggle as the climate is changing. They're dying for various reasons. I've got several that are looking very sickly. Meanwhile, laurels are starting to come up. The oak trees seem to still be doing well if there isn't the sudden oak death in the area. Redwood trees are struggling. And understanding how these trees are reacting to the changes in our climate is actually really important to understanding the climate. And just, not to keep referencing Wired, but there was an article this morning or yesterday in Wired about the fact that this transpiration that trees do, this exhalation of moisture, is actually has a lot of potential to seed clouds. So the type of exhalation from a tree is something that can seed clouds. And of course, clouds reflect sunlight in non-Arctic areas. And that plays a major role in keeping our planet cool. So having healthy trees, being able to monitor whether they're healthy, monitoring whether they're transpiring, can help us understand how these forests are affecting the climate at large.
So as more tree tags are placed, not only in forests, but in people's yards, are you going to be aggregating information in order to provide a kind of a meta view of the health of trees? And is that something we can use to better plan for climate change?
Yeah, and I like to think of this as a call to action. ePlant is collecting a data set that will be useful for understanding our planet. And it's useful for understanding both how the human forest interface is changing, how the forest in the wild is changing, how orchards and farm productivity is changing and being affected by climate. And that's useful information for us as stewards of the planet. And we intend to we like to say we're calling our customers to help us create that data set. And our goal is to make that data collection, to create that data set as inexpensive and easy to use as possible. And that's really what TreeTag represents. It's our first effort to make this data collection easy and scalable.
So people could join in monitoring the world by putting a tree tag on their on their own tree. Is
Exactly.
this something, are you already starting to see some trends that confirm, for instance, that intuitive analysis you shared about your yard, the Doug firs and the oaks and so forth, doing well or suffering as you see the climate change?
We have. So we're really, ePlant's only 2 years old, so we really only have 2 years or a little less than 2 years of data to compare. But what we've seen just in the last 2 years is 2 very different summers and winters in this region. And that's had an effect on the trees. So the trees last year were exposed to a very hot summer, a very dry winter. This last winter, we had an extremely wet winter. We actually had snowstorms up here. I had 6 inches of snow at my house at just 2,000 feet here, which is very unusual, a kind of a once in 50-year event. And we've had a cool summer. And the trees are reflecting that. You can see the trees responding. They haven't gone through the same flowering cycle they went through last year. A lot of the local plum trees didn't produce fruit this year. And those differences are, they like to say global warming, but it's really is climate change. We're seeing a change in the fluctuations in the extremes. So we've had a very, unusually cool summer, unusually wet winter, and now we're heading into a strong El Nino, which could produce even more weather variability in our region. So we're looking regionally at the moment, not globally, but that's, again, kind of the call to action here is to expand this by putting more tree tags out there.
The idea first of a regional heartbeat and being able to look into what's going on with the environment at that level is really intriguing. But if we could begin to create a net of this information for the entire planet, the opportunities to rethink our relationship with nature are pretty stunning.
They are, and I hate to use the canary in the coal mine because it doesn't end too well for the canary as an analogy, but these trees are sensing something that we're not necessarily seeing as humans. Humans have a lot more tolerance for changes in water. They can move and go get water where there isn't water. Trees can't do that. And so, and it's not just true of trees, of course, it's true of all the plants around us. So we're ePlant, not eTree. We're starting with trees, but we'll be going to all kinds of plant data collection as we move the company forward.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to envision how the monitor could be changed, the form factor of the monitor could be changed for a lot of different applications. I look forward to learning more about that. This is a really great conversation. I want to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to be right back. Let's return to the discussion with ePlant CEO Graham Hine, who developed the TreeTag smart monitor for home and agricultural use. So, Graham, one of the most interesting things about the TreeTag is that you decided to use AI, ChatGPT, to enable the tree to talk with users. Tell us about your tree. You have a tree named Barkley that you talk to. What's Barkley like, and what does Barkley tell you?
Oh, Barkley's grumpy. Barkley's a grumpy old oak tree. And, I like to ask Barkley how he's doing. And Barkley usually says, well, I'm a tree, so I'm doing the same as last time you asked me. And then he likes to go and tell me that he's, experiencing warm weather or not growing as well as he has been or thirsty and would like a drink. What we've done is put together a interface to the tree that is designed to be very human. Mm-hmm. And we're not really trying to humanize the tree. What we're trying to do is to make people interact with their tree so that they take care of it and to motivate them to do that. So the chat interface is kind of the most charismatic piece of the interface, but just as important are kind of the alerts and alarms that you get from our system. And the chat component came along because we were really struggling when we looked at the consumer market. We said, how are we going to make this engaging enough for people to really want to play with it and get to use it? Mm-hmm. Because trees are background for a lot of people. And I have a trouble with that because for me, they're completely foreground. I'm looking at trees as I'm driving. I'm looking at trees as I'm walking down the street. But most people aren't until they see a really remarkable tree or they really stop to think. This, I'm hoping, will get people to get engaged with trees and to get to know them a little bit. And the personalities are kind of fun. I've got Zesty, who's the happy lemon tree. I've got Scarlet, which is my overly proud maple tree. She thinks she's the best maple tree ever. She's a Japanese maple tree, and she's just starting to turn red, and she's telling me all about it. So these interactions with the chat side of using ChatGPT as an engine, feeding it with insights from our Insight AI, and then presenting those insights to people so that really what Scarlett wants to talk about is fertilizer right now. So Scarlett's saying, hey, it's the fall. I'm going into dormancy. I'm going to be growing roots. I'd like to get some fertilizer. Please look at that for me. And yeah.
So the AI could also add additional dimensions of insight simply by loading new information into the back end. You're not telling the tree more or the tree telling you more, but more analysis based on local weather patterns and other things that I hadn't thought about the fertilizer question before.
Well, it's kind of interesting. So the advantage of these large language models is that they are trained on a giant set of data. And that giant set of data happens to include all the horticultural information that's been published on the internet, at least without too much copyright. That information can be applied to a given tree if the ChatGPT engine is told the context. So the context is a Japanese maple at 2,000 feet in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the fall with these soil conditions. That is fed as context by our backend to the chat engine so that it knows what to talk about. And the development work here that we're still engaged with, and we had a release date planned for this later this year, but that's pushed out. And the reason is we really want to make sure that the tree is talking about its conditions and it stays on topic. And that's a little tricky with these chat engines right now. They like to wander.
So, for instance, could the tree at this time, since you haven't done the plant-based ones, could the tree serve as sort of a proxy for understanding the health of the plants immediately around it? Can it?
It sure can. I mean, one of the main things the tree is looking at. We have the microenvironment sensor on the tree, which is a mini weather station telling us about temperature, humidity, and light. Obviously, that affects all of the plants around the tree. Additionally, what we're solving for with the tree with a pulse primarily is soil moisture. And if the tree is experiencing soil moisture deficit, the plants around it are experiencing soil moisture deficit. And typically, people don't irrigate the tree, they irrigate the plants around the tree. So the tree is getting water as a result of the irrigation landing on the plants. So at the very least, we can give a pretty good indication that, hey, your soil's dry and you may want to go water your plants and incidentally, the tree.
But we're actually about to interview another company, Irrigreen, which has a very targeted watering system. Could
Yeah.
that be integrated with TreeTag, or rather, can TreeTag as a network device connect with a wide range of smart devices, including home management systems?
Absolutely. Our system, the first way to interact with the TreeTag that we released was actually through an API. Our intent is to make the data accessible and the insights accessible to other systems. So in the tree management space, we're integrating with a company called Planet Geo, where tree care companies can see their trees on a map and start to see the status of their trees on this map. That's affected through our API. The same API can be used to interact with other smart devices like home irrigation systems and targeted irrigation systems like the one you're talking about.
It's interesting. So the data itself could also enable a new service layer in the economy, which is really about re-greening the environment.
Exactly. Exactly. So this information is intended, again, we see the data collection and the tree tag is an important thing to make really good and then get out of the way. The important thing here is for us to get information about our plants.
So will there be a TreeTag developer program in the future?
Yes. Well, we're not codifying as a developer program. We're just talking to folks, and if they want to work with us as developers, we're a small enough company that it's still just an ad hoc agreement. So hopefully that'll turn into a developer program.
Well, let's hope you get that large. I would like.
Yes.
Now, you're also working with carbon sequestration projects to report how much they're capturing and the state of the forest in which that carbon is captured. Tell us about what their concerns are, and are you enabling carbon credits and that kind of transactional opportunity as well?
It's really interesting. So I got involved with this world when I talked to a gentleman who works for Amazon as part of their net zero climate pledge.
Mhm.
And he's working with a team, of course, a lot of people involved, and doing some incredible science related to reforestation in the Amazon basin. One of the challenges is the measurement of the impact of these reforestation activities. And it's more than just understanding, how many trees you're growing and how many did you plant. You really have to grow them. And he looked at our tree tags and said, "Hey, I can really use something like this. It's a tool where I could measure in real time what's happening with the trees, understand their health, and then use that measurement to help estimate the biomass accumulation." So what we're really measuring, if you think about it, we're measuring the difference between the center of the tree and the outside of the tree. So when a tree grows, that number grows. So we're measuring the delta, the change in the diameter of the trunk of the tree. That turns out to be, so if you think the tree is like a 1 foot tree and it grows to a 2 foot tree, well, it's added a foot of wood. That's what we're measuring. And that's one of the primary numbers used to calculate the biomass, which is related to the carbon. So we can measure essentially the change in carbon on a tree by tree basis in a forest. Now, you wouldn't do this on every tree,
Right.
but let's say you had a few hundred acres and you put a few hundred tree tags out there. They'd provide you with a statistically valid estimate of the carbon being added in that forest over time. And that's in addition to techniques like LiDAR, remote sensing with satellites, walking through with measuring sticks. a tool for understanding how much carbon is being added, which in turn affects carbon credits, it affects carbon claims, and it affects understanding how that forest is succeeding and growing, which trees are successful and where and why. And that helps understand how to do the next one better.
The sampling rate is an interesting question. I mean, because of the cost of planting, and I've been involved in planting about 2 million trees for a company that I work for. We were always told, well, their mangroves are they're gonna accrue about 12 kilograms of carbon annually.
Right.
But that was a complete generalization. On the other hand, the cost of a tree tag needs to be factored into the cost of the forest. And so how many trees do you need to sample, say, in a forest of 10,000 trees?
That is the question we're literally trying to answer now with the researchers. So we're working with that carbon researcher I mentioned at Amazon. We're working with with folks at Veritree as well. They're doing some really interesting work, and they're interested in just that question. How many of these can we put out to get a statistically meaningful and accurate measurement of the change in carbon in the forest? And I don't know. I think there's going to be a species variability, a regional variability, and there's going to be a temporal variability. How many young trees do you measure versus how many old or mature trees do you measure? That needs to be studied a little bit, but there's been a lot of work, good work that's been done on this topic by groups like the U.S. Department of Forestry.
Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, Veritree is the company that we did that 2 million tree project with, and their challenge was reporting back to the organization what was going on.
Right.
LiDAR, human monitoring, but to me, the tree tag is the most immediate way I've seen to measure the growth or the health of the forest.
Yeah, so Veritree has been putting our tree tags out on a trial basis in some of their reforestation activities in Canada. Great folks to work with.
So I know you have not yet released the consumer or home version of TreeTag, but when do you expect that, and how much is it going to cost?
Well, for the early adopters, we're offering the TreeTag and the Gateway. So the TreeTag is $69, and then the Gateway brings it up to $149. So for a starter kit, you'd pay $149 and then $69 for the tags. For our commercial customers, we're kind of $50 a tag, but it's an annual subscription. So every year it's $50 per tag. And the commercial version is available now. It's got a nice commercial interface. So if somebody's a DIYer, they could buy that today. But the consumer version with the ChatGPT, until I really get a wrangle on keeping the chat from hallucinating a little bit, I'm going to be a little cagey about saying when we can get that done. We're a little bit dependent on the large language models getting to a point where they can keep context well.
I agree. The hallucination problem is a significant one. Although, by gating the model to only certain issues, you might be able to solve that problem. But the question for me is, as I look at the scale, and in particularly the fact that this is wireless, is do you have to have power near the forest in order to power the radio? Is that potentially the gating factor to reaching some of the more remote places we might monitor?
Yeah, let's say we're looking at a wildlands forest situation, you'd really want to have a lily pad model where you have a gateway with solar and some kind of satellite uplink. Could be Argo, could be Starlink or something like that. But it ends up looking like a little, you've got an antenna sticking on a pole, you've got a solar panel propped up, you've got a battery under there, and you've got our little gateway device. And those are fairly easy to set up, and they work anywhere. We've done that for some of our wildlands deployments. For orchards and for residential and for anything near the urban human or the urban forest interface, I have one of these on my house, and it covers, a lily pad of a couple of miles around my house. So it's really pretty easy to get gateways to cover those kind of areas.
There's a privacy question that just occurred to me. If I'm using the radio and there are a lot of other tree tags that I don't own around, am I gathering that information as well?
The tree tags will use the gateway closest to them. So if you happen to be closest, they'll use that, and they use a tiny amount of bandwidth. And all of the information is essentially anonymized as it's coming in. So it's got a serial number and it's got the information about the tree. Um, there's always concerns about a shared network of any kind, and in a way, this is, but we think this is a pretty benign application. And again, it's one of the reasons why we're leaning into the call to action. This is let's help people out by measuring more trees. And hopefully, the kind of folks we'll be working with will just consider it better if they're helping more folks get tree tags out there.
Now, I understand you've installed a tree tag on Lahaina's historic banyan tree to track its recovery after the wildfire, and thankfully it's already starting to show signs of recovery. Tell us about that, and how is the community using the data?
Well, it's interesting. So Liquid Robotics had an office in Hawaii, and I spent a ton of time on the Big Island of Hawaii working with ocean scientists and climate scientists and local communities in understanding the oceans around Hawaii. And of course, we'd visit Maui and we'd visit Lahaina, and I fell in love with that tree. It was one of my places that sticks in my memory. So when we heard about the terrible fires in the islands in early August, we saw that the local arborists had rallied to go and try to give that tree some help and get some water to it and put some compost teas on it. And I reached out to a gentleman named Steve Nims, who's a well-renowned arborist working on that tree. And he said, yeah, we'd love to have some help. We'd love to monitor the recovery and see how it does over time and help understand what parts of the tree are recovering. So for folks who don't know, this is a 150-year-old monument of a tree. It's got something like 40 aerial roots, which are these almost trunk-like. The roots actually come down from the branches, attach to the ground, and then grow up into trunks. So it's just this forest in a tree. It covers an entire city block right outside the port of Lahaina. And so what we did is we took a dozen tree tags there. We put them on different parts of the tree, and we're monitoring the signals to understand which parts of the tree are recovering. We're starting to see a pulse. So the pulse, again, is driven by the leaves transpiring moisture. And so as we start to see some leaves pop up on the tree, those are, evaporating water by opening their pores during the day, closing the pores at night, and the tree is expanding. And we're starting to see on 5 of the 12 signals signs of a pulse. There's signs of movement on all but 3 of the tree tags we put out there. So 3 tree tags, we're getting a very flat signal. Dormancy is what we are calling that right now, for lack of a better term. And the arborists are using that to understand which parts of the tree are actually alive and moving water and nutrients and resources around in the body of the tree as they look at the greening that's happening in the canopy. The day we installed was the first day. It was August 31st. It was the first day where anybody had seen green on the tree. And so we just saw about 6 little shoots up in the canopy of green, and that was a really exciting thing. The folks who were with us were really happy to see that. But Lahaina is going to take a lot of rebuilding, and we're really hopeful that goes well for the community.
That is such an iconic tree. Can folks track what's going on with the tree online? Is that something you've thought about enabling?
Yeah, absolutely. So the data is available. We're sending that out to the community through the Lahaina Restoration blog. So our information is going to be popping up on the Lahaina Restoration blog. So I don't know if they posted the data yet, but we'll be posting links to that shortly.
Okay, great. Well, we'll include a link to that in the article that goes with the podcast. Graham, how can folks learn more and get an alert when they can buy the tree tag?
Yeah, just go on our webpage at ePlant.com, and there's a little sign up list to both lock in the discount code right now so you can get a discount for the product. And we'll let you know as soon as it's available. And again, if anybody wants to try a commercial version, it's available now. It's more of a DIY project, and you have to like looking at graphs and lines and interpreting them a bit more. It won't talk to you yet.
So if you were to buy a commercial one today and the chat comes out, will you be able to activate that on one of those?
Absolutely. It'll work just fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So the early adopter hackers can get started now, and everybody else can get on when they want a more consumer friendly experience.
Absolutely. It's more like if you're like me and you like wiggly lines, which I do because I'm a data nerd, um, there's a product for you today.
Fantastic. Well, Graham, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
A real pleasure. Thanks so much.
That was my conversation with ePlant CEO Graham Hine. As you heard, the hacker-oriented commercial version of the TreeTag is available now, and a chatty home version will soon launch, priced for $149 for the starter kit with the radio base station, and additional TreeTags will be available for $69. You can learn more at eplant.com. Technology can help us see into the environment in new ways, bolstering our senses with data that lets us identify our biases so that we can respond to climate change, local extreme weather, and drought thoughtfully and efficiently. Solar-powered devices like TreeTag, if manufactured with minimal environmental impact, can expand our sensory engagement with the health of forests, orchards, and suburban yards to reduce overwatering, preserve tree and plant species that are struggling with local weather changes, and potentially increase the yield of food produced per gallon of water used in agriculture. And if you have a tree that you love, like the dogwoods, Douglas fir, and oak trees that I care for in my yard, TreeTag does promise a new relationship. Chatting with a tree, learning when it needs water or fertilizer, can create a new intimacy with nature. But it's most important that we learn and understand our local environment first with our senses. Then we can validate and deepen that insight using monitors like TreeTag. We'll continue to explore the growth of smart yard technology with more interviews soon. In the meantime, I hope you take a moment to share this podcast or any of the interviews that we've done on sustainability in your ear by writing a review on your favorite podcast platform. It will help your neighbors find us, and we'd appreciate the support. You are the amplifiers that spread more ideas so we can create less waste. Please tell your friends, family, and coworkers they can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Audible, and all the places they look for podcasts. Thanks, folks. We appreciate it. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth 911, and we will be back soon with another innovator interview. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.